Nathan Cleary, Latrell Mitchell, Cameron Murray, David Fafita, Jai Arrow, a host of big names out this week, but one very big name back in, Tommy Hudson, back on the SuperCoach365 podcast. Mate, where have you been?
Good day, Ryan. That's what an introduction that is. It's been a few weeks, hasn't it? I think it's been 3 or 4 weeks. I had soccer for a few weeks, and then last week you were what's the word? Stepping up in the world a little bit onto SC Playbook with Timmy Williams. That was impressive. So yeah, we haven't combined for a couple of weeks, but happy to be back.
One small step for me and one giant leap for the SuperCoach365 podcast last week, teaming up with Timmy. No, it was good fun, but even better to be back here tonight with you. Speaking of big guns out, though, obviously the big news last Sunday night, Nathan Cleary will kick it off there. He's going to dominate much of the chat tonight. 6 weeks, we won't be seeing Nathan Cleary play for either the Panthers or the Blues. It's a massive blow to both of those teams.
Yeah, brutal from a SuperCoach point of view. The other night, I mean, I think I read 47% captained in round 14.
Yeah.
So that was, half the game pretty much hinging on him going big. And he started off well, try assist. I think he was on 31. And then it was pretty obvious when he did the hammy that it was serious. And yeah, worst fears we realised on Monday morning, 6 weeks out. We need to make some trades.
Yes, so stick around for that. We'll chat our trades at the back end of the podcast tonight. And you mentioned 47% captain last week. I wasn't one of them until 2 minutes before kickoff. I was well and truly sold on looping Cody Walker last week, and geez, I wish I did, but hindsight is 2020. So we can't get them right all of the time. I've been pretty lucky this season to this point to be getting those 50-50 calls pretty right. What about some of those other names though? Latrell Mitchell. Sorry, go on.
You can't beat yourself up for the Cleary decision. I mean, you're not to know he's getting injured. It's the best team at home to the worst team. If ever someone was going to go big, it was probably him on Sunday night. It was just one of those things. It
was ominous though, wasn't it, as well? Had that try assist earlier, like you said there, 31 points inside 15 minutes. It could have been anything. Latrell Mitchell, another one that probably we're not holding to this point. I know some were hoping to hold him through the Origin period, but again, Souths, they've copped the raw end of the deal last week with 3 of their Origin players either injured and probably not going to figure this week or in the weeks to come.
Yeah, Latrell's been tricky this year. I started with him. I ran out of patience. Then he went really well, brought him back in and then injured. So it has been tough trying to catch him. He's obviously one of the best fullbacks on SuperCoach on his day, but he's injury prone. And speaking of fullbacks, there's one that's come back this week. I guess he hasn't been at his best this year, no doubt. But whenever he plays, especially at home, he's a big factor, and that's Tom Trbojevic. Yeah,
of course. And you mentioned they're back at home this week. The Manly side. We will get into all of the games a little bit later, but just on Turbo, if you're not holding him now, and we're going to talk all of our trades in some serious depth later, but if you're not holding him, on the surface, is he someone that you are going to bring in this week, knowing that he's coming off a concussion, which how he's playing this week, I don't know. He has Origin 2 and potentially Origin 3 looming, but then again, he has that 160 in his rolling average. So if you don't get him this week, we're probably not getting Turbo back, maybe, for the rest of the year.
I don't know, it's a big question. I didn't even really think about it until, like you said there, the rolling average is a big factor for getting him back in future weeks. We'll stay tuned for the trading places, I guess. But I think with Origin still around the corner for him and his injury-prone nature as well, I might be avoiding.
Yeah, okay. Plenty of talking points to get through before we do chat our trades. And, of course, coming up tonight, we're going to go through the 8 games this week. Or is it 7 games this week? How many buys have we got this week, Tommy?
Only the one buy. So 8 games. It's back to a full round for once, but then we're back to the 5 games next week.
Okay, and we're going to answer a couple of questions as well back into the podcast. Before then, though, if you haven't already, and a big thank you to those that have followed the podcast or subscribed on YouTube, we wouldn't be here without you. And a big thank you to topsport.com.au as well for their support again throughout the season. It helps to no end. If you haven't already become a customer at TopSport, there's still time to do so, and use the code SCoach365 when signing up. That'll make sure that they know where you're coming from. That's a nice little segue into this weekend's action. Of course, the Thursday night game kicking us off. The Top Sport Titans back at home on the Gold Coast, taking on one of the, one of the more informed teams of the competition, the West Tigers, but they had their colours lowered last week by the Raiders, Tommy, and you were only too happy to see that happen.
Yeah, a bit of a controversial finish, but I'll take the win, no doubt. Gold Coast are becoming almost an important factor in SuperCoach because it's important to see who they're going to play each week because their games are so high scoring. It usually means that SuperCoach scores are also very high. We saw that with South last week, scoring nearly 50 points. Cody Walker had an absolute field day. So if you're owning the likes of Jareem Buller, you're probably licking your lips for this fixture on Thursday.
Has the Buller bus left the resort? I think we said last week on the SuperCoach Playbook podcast that he was like the boat at Dreamworld that just kept going around in circles because you may have missed the boat the first time, but there was a second chance to get on board. Now, I've missed that boat or that bus twice. I didn't go that way last week. He scored 111, I think it was, final scores. It was a tough watch at Campbelltown last week, seeing Buller do what he did and knowing that plenty are owning him and you and I aren't any of those.
Yeah, no, I was in the same boat. For most of the game, it was manageable, his score, but that last 10 minutes, I think he got a try and he was involved in a few other things. So it did sort of snowball out of control.
Yeah.
I guess whether it's too late or not now, I'm thinking of the round 17 bye for the Tigers. I mean, you still could get 2 good weeks out of him. I think they've got the Gold Coast this week and then maybe the Shark or someone around 16. Storm, sorry, but Storm without all their origin stars. So there's 2 good fixtures you can still get in before that bye.
Just on the Titans, David Fifita, we've mentioned that he will be out rested due to some delayed concussion symptoms. We think that's from Origin. He only played a handful of minutes last week, so maybe they were mindful of that heading into that game against the Rabbitohs last week, not to overplay him, but he will miss this week in full. AJ Brimson is back, which is a big inclusion, I think, in terms of their chances, their hopes of making the finals. And for the Tigers, it looks like Api Coruscant is named to start. So before we talk Tigers, and if there's anything there to talk, what are we doing with Fifita? If we're holding him, are we selling him this week? And potentially even, could you look to buy Tino Fa'asuamaleaui? He's been in fine form.
I think it's tough to buy people you know are going to be in Origin for the next month, unless they're absolute guns. And is Tino... Maybe he is to that level. He's going really well, no doubt. As for Fifita, I think he's probably a sell now. Not playing this week. Then he has Origin. So I think in the next 5 weeks he only plays twice maximum, and that's if he does back up from game 2. So, yeah, look, I think with other options out there, I think you probably move him on.
Tino's 5-round average, I think it's upwards of 70, so that is getting into gun territory. He scored 100 last week, and he has scored a couple of hundreds already this year. If you are having a punt on this game with topsport.com.au, of course do it responsibly and only bet what you can afford to lose, because the chances are that you're about to lose. The Titans at home, $1.82. They're favourites here. $1.98 the West Tigers head-to-head. The line, a measly 1.5, $1.90 each of 2 there, and the Tigers getting the start. So, Tommy, let's just hope that this game is better than the corresponding fixture we saw last year. I think that was dubbed the worst game in NRL history, I think.
Yeah, I remember that as well. And everyone was in unison in saying how bad that was. It was on a Thursday night as well, so hopefully it's better. Probably see some points here. That line of 46.5 over-under, I'd probably rather be on the overs, to be honest.
Okay, we look forward to that. Second game of the week, 6 p.m. Friday. This one down GIO Stadium, Canberra. The Canberra Raiders hosting the New Zealand Warriors. Canberra, $1.52 favourites, topsport.com.au. New Zealand Warriors, $2.55 outsiders. And all eyes on this game will be around Jared Croker, who will play game 300. He is back after that controversial resting last week. But, I mean, all's well that ends well for the Raiders, and it ended well, albeit in dubious circumstances, you could say. They didn't need Croker in the end, and didn't Ricky come out swinging at the end of full time?
Yeah, I felt for Joey Tarpanay, who was also at the press conference. He was just sitting there, very awkward, while Ricky just unleashed on everybody as only he can do. But yeah, as you said, they won the game, and now he's back, and he gets to celebrate game 300 at Canberra Stadium. And I think that does make the Raiders here, their players, they'll go to another level. players like Joey Tarpanay, Horsburgh, people who we have looked at in SuperCoach lens this year, I think we're looking at some decent scores on Friday night personally.
Tarpanay's been really good at lock the last couple of weeks. Do you, not even thinking Supercoach, but just as a Raiders fan who wants to see them do well, do you think he's better at 13 than 10, or is it much of a muchness and it's just that he's minutes dependent and the Raiders will benefit whether or not he plays prop or in the lock forward position?
Yeah, I don't think it matters. Like he's played lock a lot during his career, but last year when he had that real dominant patch, when we all sort of discovered him on Supercoach, he was playing front row. So he's very capable of doing both. The Warriors, though, I think they're probably a bit underrated in this market at $2.55 with Top Sport. I know it's all about Croker and the Raiders, but the Warriors are proving very plucky. And how about the form of Sean Johnson?
Well, that's one of our talking points, and testament to how well he's been playing, and a couple of tries last week really wound back the clock in his sense. But we're going to mention him in the same breath of Nathan Cleary here. Like, he is suddenly one of a couple of viable options of going Cleary down to an SJ or a Moses or a Burton maybe even. But the fact that we're mentioning him in that conversation just shows you how much he's bounced back to where we know he can get to and where we know that he's been.
Yeah, I didn't have much faith earlier in the year. He started off the season really well, and I think we discussed him a few times on this podcast. And every time he asked me, I was a bit off the idea of getting him in.
Yeah.
But he's proven me wrong, and he continues to do so. 127 last week, an average of 71. Yeah, he's in the top of the conversation for halfbacks at the moment, which is just unreal.
I think the reason why you were off him was not so much because of you knew what he's capable of. What he did last week is what you knew that he could do. It was probably the week before that you were worried about, and that's the week I mentioned him. Round 13, I think it was. What was the score? It was pretty poor from memory.
Yeah, he got a 39, and he's got a couple of other scores this year which were in the 30s. So he does have a kind of a low floor, as you'd say, but he also has a very high ceiling this year, which he probably hasn't had in previous seasons. So that's giving him that good average. They do have a bye next week, the Warriors. So maybe you could hold off 2 weeks. They do play with a round 19 bye, so it could be a little purchase around that period, maybe.
Yes. Speaking of high ceilings, you say there, what about Dallin Watene-Zelezniak? I think he scored back-to-back doubles the last 2 weeks. You mentioned, I guess, the impacts of the bye that they have, maybe making him not so much a viable option this week, or at least the next month. But again, it's hard to knock players playing well. Break even of -14, 4% owned, so real pod territory here. And the last couple of weeks, I think he scored upwards of 120 and then backed it up with close to a 90 last week. So at his best, he's someone that we should be talking about.
Yeah, it's quite amazing, isn't it? Probably even more surprising than Sean Johnson. He's not someone I've really ever looked at on SuperCoach GWZ overly, but 3 scores over 85 this year. He plays 6 of the next 7 weeks, as you say there, as a 4% owned at the moment. He would be a decent pod. Other than next week, he's playing every week. Decent run for the Warriors as well, and they're putting up a fight every week. So definitely a good shout, I reckon.
Okay, we will look on to that one there. No guesses as to who you're tipping, but again,
I don't know. I found these results on search.
that's Google going off in my home. Doesn't know about Dallin Watene-Zelezniak. I don't know how that's happened. Anyway, we'll push on. I wonder who was searching something here. Anyway, we'll play on. What was I even saying? Raiders, how much are they winning by this week?
I think it'll be closer than the market indicates. Well, 4.5 starts, so they are saying it'll be close. Raiders never win big, as evident the other day. So I think it'll be very close.
Okay, we push on here. Primetime footy, Friday night footy, finger licking good this one. Manly Seagulls back at home. I know you hate that ad. Why do you hate that ad so much?
I don't hate it. Well, I don't hate it. I don't know. There's a few ads at the moment on Fox League which grind my gears a little bit.
Thank you, actress who's playing my nan. All right. Where are we going here? Manly Seagulls back at home against the Dolphins, the team which the Warriors and Dallin beat up on last week. Manly $1.38 favourites back at home. They're a different team at Brookvale, aren't they? And that line there of 8.5, if they get anywhere near their best, they probably swallow that up against the Dolphins, who they're getting threadbare, aren't they? These injuries, suspensions, they're starting to stack up.
Yeah, do you think? I mean, for the start of the season when the Dolphins were so good, people like me, the haters, you would almost say, were just expecting them to eventually fall away. Do you think it's starting to happen now, or do you think last week the loss to the Warriors was mainly because they were without a few of their better players, some of who are back this week?
Oh, I just think they just got the Warriors at a wrong time. I think Warriors I think they had a bye around 12, so they were pretty well fresh. Just the one game after, and then the travel for the Dolphins. That was their first real travel. They've been to Sydney or Wollongong one or two times, but that was their real first trip. So it's all a part of a learning curve. They can only be better for that. They get the hammer back this week, which certainly helps their attack. They will be without Wallace and Milford, though, so two of the elder statesmen, and confirmation today that Tom Gilbert's going to miss the rest of the season. So not good there. Jeremy Marshall-King, of course, we can't not mention him. He was a late out last week as well, and he's so much of their attack from dummy half. So having him back this weekend will certainly help. 8.5 starts, it's probably right on the cusp of where it should be, that line. Garrick in the centres here, probably the talking point from SuperCoach angles.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking at now. That's why I sort of asked about the Dolphins, because I feel like if they are crashing some of these Manly attacking weapons this week, we could see some big scores from them. Obviously,
Yeah.
Turbo, we have spoken about already, and I think he's a bit of a risk to bring in, given all the circumstances at the moment. But then again, you look at his scores and 165 last start against the Raiders. It's hard to argue with things like that. There's not a lot of players in this comp with the ceiling he has. Garrick, on the other hand, just going back through his last 3 seasons, he's only been named in the centres once. That was earlier this year, and he got 35.
Yep.
It's a very small sample size. Obviously, not the score you wanted compared to the wing. You'd have to think his ceiling is lower in the centres. Would you agree?
Probably, yeah. The goal kicking certainly helps his floor, though, so that won't change. You and I, we watched, this is a bit of a story here, but we watched with great intent the 2018 New South Wales Cup Dragons. We watched them very, very closely with interest. He was a part of that team. He was a left centre in those days. He was very good. He was always in the New South Wales Origin Pathways team. So not to say that he can't play his best footy in centres. It's just something that we're going to have to adapt to. Probably doesn't get the base work out of his end, and you'd have to think less likely of being on the end of that turbo cutout pass. So we'll have to factor that in this week.
That's what I was sort of getting at. Like, I do think obviously he's capable in the centres. He wouldn't be playing there if he wasn't, but it does, I think, open up the door to maybe in a draft comp, even Christian Tuipulotu, if he's playing left wing, he could be on the end of some of those tries. Jason Saab on the right wing. If the Dolphins are to fold, I think some of these Manly backs will have a big night.
Okay, last talking point here. We mentioned Jeremy Marshall-King in passing before, but we'll spend a little bit of time on him now. Harry Grant hasn't been anywhere near his best in recent weeks. Damien Cook scoring well, but we think that he could likely be a part of this Blues Origin setup for Game 2. If it's not this week, is it next week that we trade one of those two or potentially both of them to a Jeremy Marshall-King and someone else in the weeks to come?
Yeah, again, similar to our chat before about Warriors players, the Dolphins might be there around 16. So I don't know if I want to burn a trade on him this week just for the 1 week and he's out again. I feel like he was probably a good buy a few weeks ago, JMK. Obviously, it was a bit ruined by his absence in the past 2 weeks, so it wouldn't have worked out. But I don't know if he's a great buy at the moment just because of the buy coming up. What do you think?
No, I tend to agree. I think they've also got another buy not too long after.
Yeah, around 21 as well.
Yeah, so 2 buys in the space of 6 weeks. So factor that in if you are looking at JMK. Anything else? I think very quickly, Ray Stone. We mentioned Ray Stone. He started as a season cheapie at the start of the year. 64, I think he churned out last week. Is he the one to benefit with no Tom Gilbert there? And again, maybe aside to that chat around the buy, is he someone we can look to get back in purely for points rather than to make cash?
Yeah, no Gilbert definitely helps his cause. I think also no JMK the past few weeks has helped his cause because he was sometimes filling in at hooker for a little bit during the game. But yeah, I do think I wouldn't go looking for him, but I've had him in my team the whole time. He didn't do anything at the start of the year, but he's finally starting to make a little bit of cash and put some scores on the board, which is good.
You've been kicking that stone down the road, and now you'll leave no stone unturned if you are to have him still. Terrible. All right, Saturday afternoon footy, Dragons and the Rabbitohs here. Netstrata Jubilee. This is at Cogra. Dragons outsiders $2.85. I thought they were pretty okay. I know they were versing Penrith last week without Cleary for much of that game, but they didn't go away. Dragons $2.85. Rabbitohs $1.42 favourites with Top Sport. All of the news here, again, purely looking at the SuperCoach lens, is Cody going to be in Origin too? Because if he's not, then are we flipping Dylan Brown to him? We haven't mentioned Dylan Brown yet. That's a whole nother conundrum in itself.
It is. I feel like you should already have Cody, probably. I'm glad I think we both do. I'm glad we do. Has ever been a better player at 33 in terms of just being able to win his team a game? Like, he's so good in attack.
Yeah.
Crazy to watch. I actually think he's been scoring under what I've been seeing with my eyes the last few weeks, especially against Canberra a few weeks ago. 4 try assists, only got 68. I don't know how they didn't find more points for him. But
if his name was Nico Hines, and maybe they would have found some more.
Don't start me on that. But yeah, look, I think, again, another who won't be there next week with the bye. So even if he isn't in Origin, he's still not going to play that week. I still feel like you almost need him for this game against the Dragons. It could be another 100, you'd think.
Yeah, we love South's daytime footy. Bit of rain around Sydney this week, so we'll check on that now. But you asked the question there, have we ever seen a better 33-year-old? Maybe not at number 6. Maybe at 7, like where they can be a little bit more slower and crafty and get a team around, like Adam Reynolds. What is he, 34? Like, he can win a game off his boot. But for Cody, the way that he plays, it's dynamic, it's fast, it's flat. We saw the way he hit onto that ball from Damien Cook last week at the line to crash over for a try. What other 33-year-old in the comp can do that? I think that's the question you're asking.
Yeah, and I thought once Latrell went down, that he and South might struggle. That left edge with AJ might go backwards a little bit in terms of scoring, but it hasn't been the case at all. Cody's really just picked up all the work that Latrell would have done and put it onto his back. And even AJ's been flying the last few weeks. I picked him up and he's gone. I've had a rough few weeks on SuperCoach, but he's been a shining light. He's had a lot of tries, and this game yet again, it looks really good for players like AJ.
To answer that question around rain, 30% chance of rain at Cogra on Saturday. A high of just 16 degrees, but otherwise fairly well sunny throughout the afternoon. So fingers crossed the rain stays away there. Jack DeBellin, probably the talking point from the Dragons. Many would have brought him in looking at that round 13 bye. I think he got sin bin that week against the Dolphins for a score in the mid-40s. So you would have been disappointed that week. Backs up round 14. A sickening head knock last week against Penrith. So he won't play this week. And I guess you've got to ask that question. Would you consider selling him? There's probably other options there. Tohu Harris, Tarpanay if you're not holding, Tino Sumaliawi if you want to go down that path. There's others there, front row, second row, forward eligible.
Yeah, you've definitely been unlucky if you got in JDB the last few weeks. As you said there, the sim binning into Dolphins, he got 54, then 37 the other night due to the injury, 37 against Panthers. Now he's missing this week through HIA. Then he has a bye, and then they have another bye in round 20. So I think there's enough reason there to sell him. He's only going to play 3 of the next 6 weeks. So yeah, it's just unfortunate how it's transpired for him.
Yeah. Who would you go to if you are getting rid of him?
I don't have him, but if I did, I don't know. I like the look of Jermaine Hopgood at the moment. I know 47% of people own him anyway, but I don't. So he's someone I'd be flocking to. Okay,
we'll hold that chat over till we get to the Eels. They're the last game of the week on Monday. We get Monday afternoon footy this week. Before then, though, Saturday, 5:30pm, the Broncos back at Suncorp Stadium against the Knights. Broncos $1.21, favourites here, topsport.com.au. The Knights $4.40, outsiders, the line 12.5. Broncos shocked me last week. I thought they'd be flat. I think I almost declared the Sharks 13+. I didn't use the M word. I went close. Lucky I didn't, because they were embarrassed by just how good the Broncos are.
Yeah, that game made me think their actual premiership chances I mean, they've always been a great attacking team this season, but their defense, their scrambling defense was awesome the other night. So really good. They get to come back home against the Knights. It's another game where I think the attacking players like Walsh would be looking at some decent scores, perhaps maybe in a vice captain for him.
Yeah, I'm not holding him, but looks a game that sets up nicely for him. And if you are playing the Broncos backs, Selwyn Cobbo returns for this game as well. You're probably not holding him. You wouldn't go buying him, but just a note to point out there that he will be back for the Knights. Tyson Frizzell's back, so Jack Johns makes way. He was the cheapie at one point this season, so those desperate for numbers this week. Not that many should be, but Jack Johns most certainly won't be there. Neither will Lockie Miller. I think Lockie Miller has to go down as one of my worst trade-ins in my SuperCoach history. I think I got him in. He scored a 40. He sat on the bench in a bye-affected week. Now he's been cut. So, not my best move there.
I think obviously it wasn't, and the fact he's not even making the 17 now is telling. But I do think you were a little bit unlucky. I think he just hasn't gelled with Kalen Ponga. I think the curse of Kalen Ponga continues to strike you. To be honest, his scoring was excellent, and then as soon as Ponga's come back, he was shifted out of the one jersey almost. And even when he wasn't shifted out of the one jersey, Ponga took a lot of the ball he was getting. So they got in each other's way, and now Miller's made way from the team. So yeah, I think just unlucky, and Ponga comes back to bite you once more.
He says it with a smug smile on his face. Let's leave that there. Broncos, just to recap how well they are going. $2.50 favourite to win the minor premiership. Topsport.com.au. $2.50 for a team that hasn't won a minor premiership since 2000. So they're favourites to buck history here. No pun intended there for the Broncos.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd be diving into that. You've got teams like Panthers and Souths on similar points with a lot more experienced players in their side. But I do think, as I said before, that defence they showed the other night, they're definitely becoming premiership threats. Would you agree?
Yeah, definitely. I think I even said to you at the time, the defence, that scramble, I said that's premiership winning defence. So well done to them. They've turned it around. What was it, 2020 they won the Spoon? Now 3.5 seasons later, they're... Well, 3.5 seasons later, yeah, they're on the cusp of turning that right around. The Roosters and Panthers here, Saturday evening footy, this one at Allianz Stadium. Roosters outsiders at home, no surprise there, although maybe somewhat surprising because Nathan Cleary won't line up. $1.55 Panthers favourites without arguably the best player in the game. -4.5 the Panthers, they give that away. The Roosters, speaking of outs, they'll be without Joseph Suaalii. He's been banned for 3 weeks for dangerous contact, kneeing Reid Marnie into the head. It's unlucky, but I guess it's third time unlucky for Suaalii, and he now has to sit out.
Yeah, he's been a bit of a nightmare on SuperCoach this year. I haven't held him personally, but I'm sure he would have been quite popular early doors, and he only averages 47. He's had many very low scores, and now he's out for 4 weeks. So It just hasn't been his year. He's down to 394,000, which is not a price you would expect for someone of his stature. The Roosters, yeah, I don't know. They're not doing it for me, are they? They beat the Dogs the other day, but it was far from convincing, you'd have to say.
Far from it. Just on Suaalii, he had everything set up for him to suddenly become a real SuperCoach option last week. Retained the goal kicking and looks to retain that, would have retained that for this week and probably 3 or 4 more weeks at least. He was moved back to his preferred wing spot. I think he scored a 72 last week. We would have been talking about him as a buy this week if it wasn't for that suspension.
Yeah, 78 points. I didn't actually notice that watching it, but you're right. Like the goal kicking was a big factor. Decent little run the next few weeks as well. So it is a pity for those who had him or those who were looking at him.
What about Joey Manu? Speaking of Joseph's at the Roosters, we've got to talk about Manu. I think hands up, he probably hasn't been the player that we were hoping to get when he was moved to 5/8 on Anzac Day against the Dragons. I think he scored well that day and hasn't done much since. So the question you got to ask it, is he someone that we look to move on now? Probably his peak price is behind him.
It is. The only reason I would probably hold on is because he's going to play against the Knights next week on the bye round, and he's a good chance to probably move back to fullback, you'd imagine, with with Teddy not being there. So I think you keep him for that week because that was a big reason to even have him. That week looks like a great score, but you're right, 33 and 41. He's passed his scores. It wasn't what we were expecting from Manu.
Yeah. Before we move past that name, James Tedesco, mixed week for Teddy. Struggled, probably played his worst Origin game on Wednesday night. Comes out and scores a double, nearly a hat-trick on Sunday afternoon. What about the ultimate troll of the New South Wales Blues Twitter account, naming him the New South Wales Player of the Week? I thought that was a little bit in jest from those at NSWRL HQ last week.
Yeah, it got tongues wagging, got a lot of engagement. I guess it's a smart social media play, isn't it?
Yeah.
Social people like you would know all about that. But what about him on SuperCoach? He was ordinary all year. His last two scores, he got 118, 2 weeks in a row. I think you'd wait till after Origin, but could he be a pod almost to come home with?
Well, we come back to that line. We said it last year or the year before. You can't play SuperCoach without James Tedesco. Well, clearly you can because we haven't been playing with him for most of this year. But you're right. I don't know their draw. I think their last 4 weeks is very, very tempting, at least on paper. I think maybe my tune will change looking at that again. Some of those teams that we'll mention there, their forms have changed. But on paper, at least, that looks a really appealing last month when you want to be holding Teddy.
Yeah, just having a brief look now. He does play the last 8 weeks straight, so the Roosters have no buys in that period. Round 26, which is the grand final for head-to-head comps, they're home to the Tigers, so that could be obviously a good score, a circled one in the calendar for Teddy. So, look, I don't know if I'm going to go to him or not, but it's one to look at perhaps.
All right, we'll keep our eyes on James Tedesco in the weeks to come. Before then, we head down to Amy Park on Sunday afternoon, just the one game on Sunday because of the Monday fixture. So Melbourne Storm back at home hosting the Cronulla Sharks here. Melbourne $1.55, Sharks $2.45 outsiders. Probably not a whole heap to talk about here, but we mentioned Dylan Brown. We may as well mention him again here at 5/8 because if you are going to shift Dylan Brown this week, pending the outcomes of whatever happens in court on Wednesday, probably today if you're listening to this after we record late on Tuesday night, are we going to Munster? Because if it's not Munster, it's probably Cody Walker, who many already hold, or are we shifting Manu up, speaking of Manu, moving him up to 5/8 and making use of his dual position?
Yeah, I'd probably do that, or even another one, which I might look at doing, is moving Josh Schuster down to 6. I just don't know if I want to get into these Origin players right now, just in the middle of the series. Obviously, Munster will do well in the weeks he's playing, but it's just the weeks he's not there. It's a lot of money to be sitting on the pine.
Okay, so you're ruling out Munster. What happened to Melbourne last week? Can you put your finger on it? I thought they'd win well up in Townsville. I thought they'd enjoy Sunday afternoon footy. They don't play a whole heap of day games, the Storm. So to finally get one, plenty of Queenslanders in that team, not least Munster himself, and they just flopped. They didn't fire a shot.
Are they just finished? Not finished, but they're not the team they were. I think it's quite obvious. The defense isn't there anymore. 45 points to the Cows. Yeah, I don't know. This is a big game, I think, for both teams. Probably the biggest game of the weekend. Sharks, once again, showed that they struggled against big teams last week and they couldn't beat Brisbane. And the Storm were really bad, but they're back at home. I think it's like a must-win game for both, just to prove to their fans that, they're still in this year.
So, just on the Sharks, most of us will probably sell Nathan Cleary this week. Nico Hines, what are we doing with Nico? Because if he's named in Origin, he won't be there around 16. We've seen how dangerous it is for these big names to quick back up after Origin, so probably won't be there around 17. Sharks, I think they even have a bye around 17 anyway, don't they?
Yeah, well, I've rolled the dice the last few weeks. I got rid of Hines for Moses, and it didn't work at all. Hines, even when he plays poorly, he still gets 90 points, so it's hard to not own him. I'm getting him back this week. I know it sounds silly, given that he won't be there next week, and then they have a bye, but I just think it's a trade I'm going to have to make anyway. I'd rather get him now. He plays the last 10 weeks straight, pretty much. He's going to come back in my team eventually. I'll just get him back this week. He'll probably go big against Melbourne as well. It's too hard to play SuperCoach without Hines, to be honest with you.
Yeah, it's not a good watch. I thought 75 was probably fair for him last week, and how we got to 90, I don't know. Speaking of Sharks, before we round out this game, I want to talk about Briton Nikora. I said this on the SC Playbook podcast last week that he was an option that you have to start considering. 69 last week in a badly beaten team without a try. He's still just 10% owned. We start talking of gun status at 2RF. There's plenty of names out there at second row that you can go to, but Nikora's not going to let you down. I'll say that.
No, definitely not. Sharks players in general at the moment are probably really good buys, I would say. 13 games left this year. They're going to play 12 of them. 13 rounds left this year. They're going to play 12 of them. The only week they're missing is round 17. They're playing the two big buy rounds in 16 and 19. There's so many reasons to buy Sharks players, and Nicker is right up the top. He runs that great line off Hines for the rest of the year. He's been unlucky not to go over the last few weeks, to be honest. He's due to score again. So, yeah, I think, although I don't think I'm going to him this week, I think he's a big reasons too, that's for sure.
Yeah, 5-round average of 67 without any tries in that time. For Nikora, I think I mentioned Molatalo last week as well. He was probably unlucky. If he has a day out last week, which he was very close to having, he could have scored 100 himself. He bombed a try assist back on the inside, a couple of line breaks. He dropped a dead set sitter of a kick from Moylan to that corner. He catches that, he scores without fuss. So, look, not his night last week, Ronaldo, but many would have went to him last week. Hold him, persist. The good times will come. Okay, rounding this out. Monday afternoon footy, Accor Stadium, the venue, the Bulldogs and Eels. Look, there's probably not too much more to say here than what we're doing around Dylan Brown. $1.39 the Eels, so favourites to win this game. That number, that price will certainly change if Dylan Brown isn't to be lining up. He is named to at this stage.
Yep, a lot of eyes will be on that. I think tomorrow, Wednesday, we'll know. I'm pretty sure he's due in court again, and we'll find out a bit more about what is happening, and the NRL will have to make a decision sooner or later, because he was named today, obviously, but they haven't actually made a final decision, the NRL, on if he's going to be stood down or not. If he isn't stood down, I've got him at the moment. I'm happy to keep him. If he is stood down, yeah, like I said, I might look at moving someone like a Josh Schuster down to 6 and getting in a second row. What's your position at the moment?
I actually traded Brown out Sunday afternoon when I heard the news. So I'd already traded out Phoenix Crossland, who plays this week and plays 16 Crossland. So I was like, look, if I'm being without Brown, I sort of made a decision on the case that it's such a... Even though it doesn't carry the penalty of what is required for the no-fault stand-down, the NRL, I can't imagine they're going to have a guy out there running around with 5 counts of sexual touching. Minto Oztag may be a different story. The NRL will not allow that. But in saying that, like, what is doing Dylan Brown? Why is he out on a bye week? I know he's a young bloke, got to enjoy himself, but... Talk about throwing a curveball at not only us as SuperCoaches, but his club as well.
Yeah, his club is just coming good, really. They got a great back end to the year in terms of fixtures, and they're just coming off some good wins as well. So it is not the great timing for the club. Hopefully, for everyone involved, really, it's nothing too sinister. And he can still take the field and whatnot. But yeah, I don't know. It's just one of those things. You can't plan for that. The Eels can't plan for that. We can't plan for that. Like we said tonight, we'll just have to go and ride with it. If he is named, are you going to look at getting him back in or no?
No, I think I just have to ride with what I've got. It would be a waste. I know he plays that bye week. If he plays the bye week, maybe 16, I get him back. Because, I don't know, I'd rather wait. Who knows what happens in the next week. It's just, we have to be fluid. Speaking of the Eels halves, though, Moses at halfback, again, if you're not holding him, which you're actually, I think are you planning to sell Moses back to Hines this week, or what are you doing there?
No, so I've sold Cleary back to Hines. I've had Moses for a while. Eels, as we've probably said a few times, they're the only team to play 13, 16 and 19, all the buys. So I am quite heavily invested in them at the moment. So I'm happy with Moses, how he's going. Even players like Gutho and Hopgood, a lot of people do own, but Gutho is another one which
Mhm.
you could definitely make a case for at the moment, given the fixtures he is playing, and he's a pretty consistent scorer.
I'll certainly make a case for Gutho. Very quickly, Matt Burton, what about him at halfback? Could you go Cleary to Burton even? Goal-kicking halfback there, maybe besides Hines and Moses. They're pretty rare otherwise. Burton, the team's on his back. When the Bulldogs are doing well, he has to be the focal point of their attack.
Yeah, and he's also another one that's playing the next 2 bye rounds as well. So good coverage out of Matty Burton. Will he be in Origin though? I feel like that's a big consideration because, with no Cleary, it does open a door for a playmaker. He was in 18th man, I think, in game 1, so he's definitely thereabouts. Do you have any?
Is he the perfect?
guess?
Is he the perfect Jack Whiten replacement? He's probably the closest thing to Jack Whiten that New South Wales has. Can play centre, can play 6. At a pinch, you could throw him in on an edge in the back row. Like, got that big body. Kicks goals as well. If anything happens to one of the goal kickers,
I got a feeling Burton will be there game 2 at minimum 18th man, and we saw the 18th man didn't play club footy that week. So even with Latrell at the moment, hasn't played for a while, and he's not named this week. That could be another thing for New South Wales to consider. And Burton can definitely play left centre. So yeah, watch this space with Burton. I'd just be a bit scared he's going to be in Origin.
Yeah, not for me. Not for me this week, Matt Burton. All right, Tommy, we're going to have a quick break. The other side, we're going to do our trading places. We'll run through our moves for this week and answer a couple of your questions as well. I'm sure there's a couple to get through tonight.
Are you suffering from frequent bouts of bet limititis?
Try TopSport. Other providers may significantly limit your bets, causing frustration and angst. TopSport clears that blockage by welcoming big and winning punters, giving you fast, effective relief on those bigger bets. Overcome bet limititis by downloading the TopSport app today. Brought to you by TopSport. Feel the excitement.
What are you really gambling with? For free and confidential support, call the number on the screen or visit the website.
That number on your screen, 1-800-858-858. The website, gamblinghelponline.org.au. What are you really gambling with, Tommy Hudson? All right, let's have a look, though, at... Well, what are you laughing for?
You put it straight on me. What are you really gambling with?
Yeah, what are you? All right, let's have a look here at our futures markets. This is where we check in with the futures markets and maybe a bit of movement here this week. Penrith wound out 20 cents from $3.50 to $3.70 on the back of that Cleary news. It probably doesn't have too much of an impact, does it? Pending it's a 6-week injury at this stage. We assume that they're still going to make the top 4, and from there there's still every chance of winning the premiership.
Could it, in a roundabout way, help them win the comp? The timing of this injury, it means he doesn't have to go through the grueling Origin series. He might be more fit for the back end of the year for the Panthers.
Well, we saw this the last 2 years in different circumstances. He did his shoulder in Origin 2021. I think he done his shoulder. He missed 6, 7, 8 weeks, whatever it was. He come back, they win the comp. 2022, he was suspended for that spear tackle at Parramatta. Again, 6 weeks out or whatever it was, he comes back, they win the comp. So it's funny how these things happen third time around. So again, very similar. He'll spend 6 weeks on the sideline there. Talking of minor premiers, we mentioned the Broncos before. Penrith right in that conversation as well. The Rabbitohs for mine, they're the value, $4. They still have 3 buys to come.
Yeah, they do. And even though they haven't been convincing lately, I think they are missing Latrell, and Cam Murray, I guess, is a bit of an out the next couple of weeks, but I agree there's probably some value. I thought Parramatta at 19 were value, but I do want to see what happens with Dylan Brown.
Mm-hmm.
Parramatta have beaten South and Penrith this year so far. So they have shown a couple of times that they can match it with the 2 best sides or the 2 most favoured sides. So I think they are probably a bit of a dark horse.
Okay, anything else here you like from a futures markets perspective? A fun one to look at that we don't often talk about, the top point scorer. Who would have picked this at the start of the year? Jermaine Asako, $2.50 favourites from the Dolphins. There's some good markets here, some good value around Nick Meaney of this Melbourne Storm, goal-kicking, try-scoring option as well, and Mitchell Moses. The Eels, if they can come good, that he's never going to be too far away.
Yeah, I haven't had a great look at it. I mean, Johnson would have been flying up lately, I'd imagine, with getting back. They seem to be going back left again, the South Sydney Rabbitohs. They're going right early in the year, but Johnson's cashing in on the left. I would have picked Ruben Garrick before a ball was kicked, but he's out to $67, so I'm assuming he's a long way off the lead.
Yeah. Again, you can check all these markets out, topsport.com.au. That's where you'll find these. Tommy, let's do this. Trading places for round 15, heading into round 15. And obviously some of these, not only with this week in mind, but the next couple of weeks. Run us through your moves for this week.
Yeah, 2 moves this week. Forced moves, really. Cleary, I pretty much had to pick between him and Hines a few weeks ago, and I picked Cleary, but probably, as it turns out, it was the wrong way to go with the injury. So I'm just reversing that basically back to Hines. As I said, he's not there next week nor round 17. So it is a little bit, I guess, it's a query as to why I'm doing it this week. But I can't sit here and watch him play again on Sunday and not have him. I'll probably captain him as well against the Storm, even though it is against Melbourne. Hines just proves that he can score big every week. He's averaging 99 through a lot of games. So
Wow.
he's just a bit of a freak on SuperCoach. I know we call him a bit of a unicorn when it comes to just getting miracle points. I kind of see that, so I'd rather be with him than against him. And my other trade is Fafita out for Jermaine Hopgood. Spoke about it earlier. Fafita only playing twice in the next 5 weeks at most. Hopgood's playing 4 games after. Back on the Hopgood train after a few weeks off him.
So recapping those moves there, that leaves you with 17 trades remaining, 1 trade boost remaining. That's important. And plenty of cash in the bank as well, $261,400 to go with it. So even if you say Moses falls off a cliff in 6 weeks' time, you should have enough money there to go back to Cleary when the time's right.
Yeah, I guess Cleary is definitely, he'll be straight back in, all things being equal when he's back. Maybe even David Fafita, I might look to get him back in as well because I think his ceiling is far greater than any other 2RF in the game. How are you this week?
My moves this week, I'm looking at, again, a forced move with Nathan Cleary out to Nico Meaney for mine. I think he's just... I sat here last week, this same time last week, and I just said, no, not for me, not Nick Meaney, but I think I just have to get over the fact that his name is Nico Meaney because he's playing that Pappenhausen role. He's scoring tries. He's doing it off his own boot. That chip chase last week was something we haven't seen from him before. So scoring in new ways, kicking goals. Melbourne, I think I don't have many Melbourne assets. I want to start to be playing with some of them ahead of round 16. They play the West Tigers. So Nick Meaney, good option there. Lockie Miller, again, almost a forced move. I'm going to Clint Gutherson, round 16, round 19 in mind. And I think that the Eels... They've got a great, beyond those major buy rounds, I think this Gutho, you'd be happy to hold him for as long as you can. Last move here. Now, this isn't necessarily a move that I've needed to make, but it just really shores up my front row, second row options. And that is Davi Moale out to Tino Fa'asumaliawi. Now, look, it's a little bit of a curious one because Tino obviously plays Origin. We assume, hoping he gets through that unscathed. But I want him this week against the Tigers. He plays Origin. He may not back up round 17, but from that point, the Titans, their buys are done. So he's a season-long keeper. That gives me front row forward options of Tino, Tohu Harris, Joey Tarpanay as well. So 3 big guns there up front that will do a job when one or a couple of them can't play for different reasons. So... that's the last of my boost as it is. 15 trades remaining after these 3, 90,000 in the bank. So it's a bold move. There's still plenty of time left in the season to only have 15 trades and no boosts, but that's the way I'm heading at this point.
I like the trade-ins for sure. I think all 3 of those guys, like you said, you're hoping to keep for the rest of the year. Meaney and Gutho both have great coverage the next few weeks and barely have any buys the rest of the year. Same as Tino. Obviously, hopefully he gets through Origin unscathed. You will miss him for 1 or 2 weeks there, but I think all things being equal, it's a good trade in. I guess you kind of answered your own problem there. 15 trades left and no boosts.
Yeah.
After this week, there's still 12 rounds to go. So, I mean, you've obviously done the maths and you've weighed it up. Do you think it's long enough to last without a boost?
I just look at my team and I think there's who else besides the ones I have do I not have at the moment that I will want? The obvious one's Cleary. And besides that, maybe it's Dylan Brown back. And then, I never say that the team's finished, but it's pretty close. Even if I had to do a 2-for-1 trade and Nuff out to get those guys back in, still 11 there. There's 11 weeks after that. So I don't know. I was sort of having a look at it. I don't think that last boost on that last weekend of Origin is going to be that important. I sat here and looked at it the whole season and I said I wanted to boost in around 20 or 21, but there's not a whole heap of Origin players out there that I don't have that I want back is sort of where I'm getting to.
Yeah, if you think, I guess the only issue now for you is just praying there's not many injuries and suspensions because, like, you're probably right. If things go well and as you're expecting them to, it may be enough trades and you probably don't need that extra boost. But I mean, if one thing goes wrong, it could be a bit of an issue. But how do you know? You can't plan for everything, can you?
No. So my team as it is, and we will update our final teams on our Instagram on Thursday before kickoff in the Titans and the Tigers. But my 1 to 17 as it is, 1 to 13. Let's go 1 to 13 and then we'll do the reserves. Fullback, Jermaine Asako. Centre wing options, Ronaldo Mulatalo, Greg Marju, Nico Meaney and Ruben Garrick. 5'8", Cody Walker. Halfback and captain at this stage is Nico Hines. Cody Walker, my vice-captain. Second row forwards, Britton Nikora, Jermaine Hopgood, Tohu Harris. Front rowers of Tino Asumaliawi and Joey Tarpanay. Hooker, Damien Cook. Now my reserves, as it is at the moment, Connolly Lemuelu, Josh Schuster, Joey Manu at 5'8", and Clint Gutherson at fullback. So, I don't know. I'm pretty happy with that team this week.
Who was your vice captain? Sorry, I know your captain was Hines.
Cody against the Dragons on Saturday. So
Cody,
if he goes large, I'm sure I can find a way to loop that.
Loop him this week, not like last week.
I won't not loop Cody this week if he gets 100.
Yeah, I'll go through mine now. So I've got Walsh at the back. He's my vice captain for now against the Knights, but could look at other options. Not sure yet. Farnworth, Stafford Toa, Johnston and Ruben Garrick. So a lot of attack there. Cody Walker and Nico Hines in the halves. I've got Nico captain as well. Mm-hmm. It is a hard game against the Storm, but as we said, he can find points from anywhere. Hopgood, Preston and Hosking in the 2RF. Horsburgh and Welch. Welch just hangs around like a bad smell.
Yeah.
And Damien Cook at hooker. And my 4 reserves this week are Schuster, Moses, Dylan Brown if he's there, and Will Kennedy.
Good team. You happy with that one?
I am. As we've said a few times, Dylan Brown's news will be pivotal. If he's out for a few weeks, I might have to change my trades and get rid of him instead of David Fafita, but hopefully he's good to go.
Yeah, fingers crossed for holders still that the news is good for Dylan Brown. And again, we reserve all of our judgments there. Let's go to the listeners' Q&A to round this out, and hopefully, I'm sure there is a couple here that we will get to. There's plenty. All right, first one from Jetto. He's got a couple here. His first one, that's quite an easy answer, I think. Are we selling Nathan Cleary? As we just both pointed out, we are.
Yeah, 6 weeks is too long to wait for him to come back. Got to get rid of him.
Second one here for Jetto says, is Turbo ready to explode at Brookvale? Every chance to this week. There's no reason why he shouldn't.
Yeah, what score do you think he'll get? I'm going to go 115.
Nah. You're under 100.
Not that high?
Under 100.
Wow.
Not to say he won't, but I just think, I don't know. Dolphins. How can I bet against my Dolphins? Daniel Heath Bell Property. Is it too late to hop on Asako if Brownie's out? So via the duels, probably moving Manu up and getting in Asako at centre wing. I'm going to say no, because I think you can keep Asako rest of the season.
Yeah, look, I agree. Asako's probably been my worst player that I haven't had this year. I haven't had him once, and he's been so good.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I don't think it's too late either. I think you're right. Good coverage for the rest of the year.
Couple of questions here from Nipper Simpson. He says, Cleary to Moses, and if we are going that path, would you even consider Moses as a captain this week?
Yeah, Cleary to Moses looks good to me. I think it would be a very popular trade. And captain, it would be a good pod move. I mean, not many people do that, but it has potential because he goal kicks and he's a pretty dominant playmaker.
Playing the Bulldogs this week, I think from memory, this was the game last year where we thought Eels would win by 30 and they got pumped. This was the day that Carraz announced himself last year as a real Supercoach option. Carraz back this week. We failed to mention that in the Bulldogs-Eels preview. Westy Bro says here, David Fafita out to John Bateman or Keon Kalamatangi?
I don't mind Bateman there because they play around 16 and 19, the Tigers. So it might be decent coverage for the rest of the season.
Any love for Keon? Playing South, that right side, inside Campbell Graham. The only option is, not option, but the point of consideration is pre-Origin, pre-Game 1, pre his injury, he was in every Origin team that anyone had ever wanted to trot out. So Frizzell was very good on that right-hand side for New South Wales, but I don't think he's a sure thing to hold that spot if Kalamatangi's fit.
They've still got 3 buys South to come this year.
Yeah.
I think that's a bit of a consideration to have for some of these South players who aren't the Codys and the Latrells of the world. It's just a big, especially round 26, they're not playing. So it's a big round.
That answers Cameron Shembry's question around Keon Kalamatangi. Goodbye this week. Maybe, look, in isolation this week, yeah, probably he is, but consider more than just this week with your trades. Nipper Simpson says here, hey boys, did your ranking take a huge hit after captaining Cleary? Tell you what, man, this guy is on me. As soon as I do something wrong, he is in the DMs. First one to let me know about it. I love it. Nipper Simpson, look, probably a good thing. We've taken 58 minutes here to get to our rankings. Do we want to recap our rankings from last week? I was hopeful to avoid it, but
I was wondering when it was coming.
Now's the time.
Mine's terrible. I'm down to top 6%. I'm 9,777, barely in the top 10,000. It's been a horrible month. Last week I only got 1,022, which was mostly down to Cleary, obviously captain, but most people captain him, so wasn't even too sad about it because a lot of the game did. How are you going?
Last week you actually tipped me out. I only got 950, so that was a shocking score. Even if I looped Cody, it probably was going to be just over 1,000, so not a great score. Season rank 2,212. I lost 1,266 ranks last week alone. So a massive red arrow for me. Top 1% overall though. So the overall score 16,038. So not the best week last week. Thank you for asking, Nipper. What else we got here? Tyler Dolinick says, we'll leave that one. Tyler Quinn06 says, who to trade in for Miller? I'm going Gutho or Meaney via the duels, depending on which way or where you're playing Miller, but Gutho or Meaney for mine there.
Yeah, I like both. Is it too hard to get to a psycho from Miller? How far has Miller fallen in price? Is it fallen?
I think he was 615. So yeah. Sarko, he's flying. We'll have a look here. Sarko's 791, so it's a fair
it's almost 200k between. Yeah, I like what you said about Meaney. To be honest, if there's similar price bracket, you have to get rid of Miller, unfortunately.
Maybe if you're not holding him, what about Greg Marju? Just 18% of teams. Again, you can tap into that Knights flavour. You get a try scorer, but you get someone who works as well. Last time out, Marju scored 138, so that price is only going to continue to go up. I think Marju, aside Meaney and Gutho, goodbye this week, and you could happily hold him, I feel, rest of the year.
Yeah, I don't hate Marzu at all. Only tricky thing for him, maybe Broncos, Roosters, Penrith next 3, but he has decent base anyway, so he may score okay.
Okay, Jai Christie says Simonson hasn't been a bad pod and should be considered. He's played well, I feel, since he's moved to left centre. How did he go last week, Simonson? He also had the bye,
He's
so
been
he didn't
scoring
play.
pretty well.
Yeah, he had a bye.
Yeah, but prior to that, he had been scoring well. And look, I haven't looked at him, to be honest, but as we said before, the Eels players, they're all playing around 16 and 19. So they definitely, you can make a case for most of them, and he's in form.
There's probably better pods, though. Like, I get the idea of getting someone different to the rest of the pack, but is that really someone that you want to be looking at? Like, again, let me just recap my centre wing options this week, and not, throwing around myself as the pinnacle of SuperCoach, but Meaney, Garrick, Marju, Joey Manu, Asako, even via the duels, Connolly Lemuelu probably averages more than Bailey Simonson. Like, there's a whole heap of names there that probably you don't need to risk going to Simonson for.
Yeah, and he's 518k. It's not like he's mega cheap. So
yep.
I'm probably saying no, but I don't think it's the worst shout I've seen.
Okay, Shanley 1911. Who are the must-have 5'8s to end the season? Great question. Is Dylan Brown one of them, or can we only answer this question tomorrow? Maybe we take Brown of it. Brown aside, who are the two you want?
Yeah, well, I would have said Brown Walker. Walker, I think this year he's just gone back to that form we knew he had a few years ago on SuperCoach. Where he was probably the best 5'8 in the game. So even despite the fact Souths have a lot of buyers, I still want Walker. Could you look at Munster maybe post-Origin, perhaps? I don't think the Storm, I don't think they have another buy after Origin, so you might get a good run out of him.
Yeah, and I don't think they're in a position to be able to rest him this year either. They're not playing that well. They're not going to be top 4 certainties. So Munster, in years gone by where they may have rested him after an Origin, they're probably not going to get that out of him this year. And what about Phoenix Crossland? Do you want to talk about Phoenix?
He surprised me. I think he got 78 last start. He did score a try, but he's named in the 9 this week. So I know you won't ask me that question seriously, but I gave you a serious answer anyway.
Thanks, mate. Okay, 2 more here before we wrap this up. Nolan Clark, is Manu a sell with his high break-even and recent scores? I'm going to say no, but that's the only thing keeping him there is his dual position status and the fact that I'm going to need him next week when Souths are on the bye, and I'm going to need him playing 5'8" because I don't have Dylan Brown.
Yeah, you can't sell him at the moment. If you've had him, yes, you just got to lick your wounds and wait till next week when he's fullback against Newcastle and hope he goes big.
Okay, last one here, and Tommy, you can probably answer this because you don't have him. From Cato C, is Asako worth the price tag? Now, in the sense that, is he worth it? Obviously, he's worth it because the prices are based off their performance, but maybe change the wording of this question. Would you buy Asako this week knowing that there's buys on the horizon, and the Dolphins, we think that perhaps they're starting to wane. Again, no pun intended. The wheels are going to fall off. Maybe.
I think I'd wait another 2 weeks. Tough game this week away to Manly, then a bye. Then they played the last 11 out of 12 games or thereabouts. His scoring is hard to argue with. 5 scores over 100. Another one of 97. Been an amazing year from him. So he's probably someone I want to finish with if I can get to him, yeah.
Certainly. Okay, stay tuned for our teams, as we say, in the lead up to kickoff at SuperCoach365. Tommy, what are you looking forward to most this weekend?
I look Croker 300 for the Raiders fan. He's big, and I need some green arrows. So green win and green arrows, please.
Fingers crossed for both for you. Fingers crossed no more injuries this week. Fingers crossed for everything, really. See you next week.